Welcome to this GBN podcast, Daughters of Wisdom. I'm Melissa, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Nancy Hixson and with Tammy Treat, and just to be looking at this woman that we hear so much about, this Proverbs 31 woman who it can seem a little bit intimidating when we talk about her. But, I think it's neat because today getting to be here with you all, it's nothing that you've done, but we look at this Proverbs 31 woman and she's a little intimidating. But how often do we meet a woman that we admire and we're intimidated by her? I can remember meeting both of you on totally separate occasions, years apart. Like Tammy was the first one I met. And I'd heard so much about Tammy Treat and this missionary family and all that they'd given up for the work of the Lord and the sacrifice. And it was intimidating just to be in your presence because I felt so small, and then getting to meet Nancy and when she showed up, and it was just fabulous. It was like pulling into the parking lot today, and I just looking at your cool Jeep, it was just so much just drips off of you. Like, I think you're amazing. And it was great to meet you in Alabama when you and Mike came down, and getting to see just what you're capable of. You're so athletic and you're just a go-getter, and it can be intimidating. Well, then we look in the Bible and we've got Proverbs 31 woman. Have you all ever felt intimidated by her?
Just a little bit.
She's
got a list.
She's kind of like Superwoman.
Mm-hmm. Right, kind of like
Exactly.
Superwoman, yeah. It can feel like there's an impossible standard there. And I think I've heard that a few times. I don't know if you all have. I feel like I can't measure up to her. I don't know how to be like that. We see her buying the fields and making the clothes and rising while it is yet night. She gets up while it's still dark, right, to feed her family. And she's managing her household like this godly CEO. And it's what we're looking at ourselves in the mirror. How can I do all that? But do you ever wonder if you'll ever measure up to what's listed there in the Proverbs 31 woman? What are some ways for you all individually that you viewed this worthy woman throughout your Christian life? How have you looked at her, Tammy?
She's always been like the epitome of what maybe someday, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe she's also kind of like where we put Jesus in the category of perfection. She's not perfect, because obviously, but at the same time, maybe she's a little too attainable for us. Maybe we see her as, well, I'll never get there.
Yeah.
Instead of, let me try to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see what I can do.
Right. That's good. Can I at least work towards that?
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Nancy? What are some ways that you've looked at her?
Well, like she's the goal of, the woman that you want to grow into and become, as teenagers, I'm sure you all did studies of the virtuous woman, and, it's like, wow, she's really incredible. And, I want to be that woman one day, but, you realize along the way you stumble and make mistakes, and, but, that goal is still there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And keeping the goal is key.
And striving for it.
Mm-hmm.
Striving for that goal,
Mm-hmm.
reaching toward it. That's it.
We certainly will never meet that goal if we're not trying to.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right. But when we look at her and we say, why should I even bother?
Mm-hmm.
Just throw our hands up. I can't do any of that. Well, what if we have been looking at her through an incorrect lens, so to speak, through a lot of our studies and through a lot of our time? What if we've not exactly been viewing her the right way? Instead of seeing her as just this impossible checklist of things to do on a day-to-day basis, can we view her as a picture of just what a God-filled life is supposed to look like in a life of service to Him, in a life of faithfulness to Him? So we're going to talk about emulating this worthy woman and how it doesn't have to feel impossible, that it is something that we can reach toward, and not only reach for it, but we can get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this chapter, it starts out talking about Lemuel. Tammy, would you care to do verse 1 there?
Mm-hmm. The words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. You know, it's interesting because Lemuel means belonging to God.
Mm-hmm.
And in Hebrew, it's called the symbolic name of Solomon.
Mm.
Now, we don't really know the true identity, and, you know, we're never told, so we can't know for sure. But it's possible, is it possible that he was Solomon? That this is Solomon? And if so, then that means his mother is Bathsheba.
Well,
Okay.
It's an interesting point. That is. That's a question worth asking. What does that mean to us if it is Solomon and then she would be Bathsheba? You know, does that maybe make us look at her like, okay, well, this was clearly a woman that had her own faults. Mm-hmm. She had her own shortcomings. What are your thoughts on that, Nancy?
Well, I think, you know, number one, if it is Bathsheba, we see that someone can make changes in their life and, you know, become a God-fearing, God-following person. Mm-hmm. And, you know, two, I think it's really interesting to look at if this is Solomon, that, you know, this King Lemuel, or however you say it, then that means that Ruth was his great-great-grandmother. Mm. And it's interesting to look back in the book of Ruth in chapter 3 and verse 11. The same wording is used to describe Ruth in this verse as it is in verse 10 of Proverbs 31 that we're looking at. Mm. And it's Boaz talking to Ruth, and he says, "Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." It's the English Standard Version, but a worthy woman. And not just that Boaz knew that, but the whole town knew of her. So, you know, Ruth was obviously displaying so many of the characteristics that are listed in Proverbs 31. And, you know, you just kind of think, okay, maybe Solomon didn't have the privilege of knowing his great-great-grandmother. Mm-hmm. Maybe Bathsheba, possibly, maybe not. But, you know, they probably did know of her legacy.
Absolutely.
And know what type of person she was. And that may have played a part in the description here of the virtuous woman.
And that's great because, you know, you think sometimes we get in our minds, it's not attainable. We can't do that. That's not what this mother did in this chapter. This mother's looking back at potentially this great-grandmother, Ruth, who had other just amazing characteristics, and said, I want you to find a woman like that. I know she's out there. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as a boy mom, 3 boy moms, and, you know, you got 2 boys, you have a boy, you want that for your child.
Definitely.
And that's kind of where it looks like this could be going if this is Bathsheba. Don't find a woman like I was. You can do so much better. You have the ability. She's out there. She is seeking after God. And this is what you can find. Go look for her. Seek for her as for a hid treasure. Mm-hmm. So it's there's a lot to unpack there. It's really neat. Mm-hmm. If we go into verse 2, it says, "What my son, and what the son of my womb, and what the son of my vows." So this is a mother to a son. It's inspired recordings of words of wisdom. And that's what we want to do today. We want to share words of wisdom with our sisters. This is a prophecy from a mother written to her son. And anything that we can instill in them while we have them, isn't that what we want to give to them? We recall that Bathsheba, she wasn't always the wife that she needed to be. Certainly not to Uriah. That she betrayed him and she suffered because of it. She had the death of her firstborn son because of her sins. There was so much guilt there. There had to have been, just carrying that around day in and day out. So if these words are Bathsheba, and she would have said them with regret. She would have said them as if to say, don't do what I did. Don't make the same mistakes. She just wanted her son to be better and find better than what she had done. So I was in a ladies' Bible class. Have you all ever heard of, this was a new word to me, maybe you've heard it, but a Hebrew chiasm? Had you heard it before?
Mhm.
See, it was new to me. And so I was like, what fascinating thing are we studying today? Well, this Proverbs 31 is said to have been written in a Hebrew chiasm. And we're going to have an image up on the screen, but it's a literary structure in which ideas or themes are presented in a mirrored, symmetrical pattern. So the key idea or the climax of the Hebrew chiasm, it comes in the center. And you're going to see that. It almost forms an arrow to the main point of the subject. It's a poetic form, and it's common in Hebrew scripture, and it helps with emphasis, memorization, and deeper meaning. You know, we think about how they used to memorize all these scriptures in the Old Testament, and the old law was just really written on their hearts. Well, this was one of the ways that they did it. So there's a structure that's similar in Proverbs 31. And as we go through some of these verses, we're going to be looking at how they mirror one another. But, you know, before we really get into that, we look at this woman who's talking to her son. And for many women, Proverbs 31 woman, she feels like it's that impossible standard. And her accomplishments, can we do it? Can we measure up? But what if we are looking at her the wrong way? And what if we look at her looking at this Hebrew chiasm, this form of poetry, to help us understand the scriptures better about who she was? So, Tammy, what do you think about that?
You know, I think about my own life, and sometimes I know I've been in a conversation with someone before, and I've just had a memory out of the past and mentioned, oh, well, yeah, when we did this. And they would look at me and go, you did what? And it got me to thinking, you know, if we actually, especially as we age, we get more experiences in life. And if we actually sat down and started writing out all of the things we've done in life, you know, it may start with, you know, I graduated from high school. I got my college degree. I met my husband. Maybe we did a mission trip. Maybe we did, we moved to another place away from family and we lived there, and then we had children, and then we did that. If you started actually listing the things, as you get older, that list is going to get pretty long.
Yeah.
But you realize if you look back at it, but I didn't do all this, you know, in a couple of years. This is a culmination of my life.
Yeah.
So it's not like a checklist where every week I'm picking a different one to check off that list.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would help us to look at this in a different way. Is this is over my life. This is not over my year or even my 5 years. You know, this is a long-term plan.
Lifetime accomplishments, lifetime plans. Yeah. So that sounds really feasible with looking at it. So the passage really isn't this day-to-day list. It's that lifetime of faithfulness that's recorded just in one single chapter, almost like we hear people give their biographies.
Exactly.
And it's just this snapshot of things that they have accomplished so that you can trust in them, right? And so we're given this snapshot of her, and we can trust in her because she had a life that was fulfilled around God and her family. Nancy, what do you think about that idea of the lifetime of faithfulness?
It is definitely what we should be striving for. That whole life, you know, we're not just focusing on this month, or, you know, it is a journey that we want to end in heaven. So it is a lifetime of living faithfully to God. That's what we're striving for. And, you know, we may not do it right every day. You know, there may be periods of time that we miss the mark, but we stay on that goal of
getting back to it.
Right. Yeah. Of faithfulness. Look at Proverbs 11, verse 5, talking about this journey, this walk in life that we make as we try to keep this lifetime of faithfulness. It says, the righteousness of the blameless keeps his way straight, but the wicked falls by his own wickedness. Our walk, our lifetime of faithfulness, it has to be straight. It has to be according to what the Bible says. That's how we stay on that, you know, okay, we may mess up here, but we get back on that straight path, and we keep heading toward that goal, that ultimate goal of heaven. In Ephesians 5, verses 15 through 17, it's a really good description. Paul says, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." That's the key, understanding what God wants us to do. And where do we get that?
From His Word.
From the Bible, from His Word.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's our walk of a lifetime of faithfulness.
It is.
Yeah.
And you talked about keeping it straight. I think about the Proverbs writer. Maybe one of you could find the verse. I don't have it right offhand, but turn neither to the right hand nor to the left. Let thy eyelids look right on. Stay focused on what's ahead and where it is that you need to go. We keep it straight, and we keep our walk in the direction it needs to be going. So we've got, looking at the way that this Hebrew chiasm is laid out, she is not meant to just exhaust us from the day to day and think that, oh, I've got to get up at 4:30 and I got to go kill the chickens and pluck all the feathers. Now, there's some of those ladies out there that are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
They're amazing, and
Yes.
I admire
Mm-hmm.
them. They intimidate me. They intimidate me. But she's not meant to exhaust us. She's meant to inspire us and to help us keep our focus. So looking at this chiasm, in the center of it, it comes down to her husband being in the middle of it. When we get to verse 23 of Proverbs 31, it says, "Her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land." He's able to sit among the elders. One of the things that enables him is because of who his wife is. Remember, we're talking about her and her attributes, but then we have it all centered around him and what he's doing. And he's a respected man. And so he's at the center of this chiasm. She's described as an excellent wife, not just because of her skills, but because of the impact that she had on him.
Mm-hmm.
It's how she strengthens and benefits, not just her arms,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what's to strengthen her arms, but she benefits him because she is a strength to him, rather than simply listing the tasks that she performs. That's not really what it's about. Why is that, though?
Well, she's an encouragement to him. That she's supporting him. Just like we all, three of us, are married to preachers.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that it takes support from us for them to be the effective preacher that they are.
Absolutely. It's one of the first things, and it was a scary thing. I had never heard it before, even though I've learned since that it's common. Behind every good man is a good wife. Behind every preacher is a good preacher's wife. And you hear that and you're like, oh, the pressure's on. But it's very much true, and especially we see it in this verse. What do you think about that, Tammy?
Well, what automatically comes to my mind is that, what would you call it? Not a phrase, but the image of, they say that the man's the head of the home, but the wife is the neck that turns the head.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of that is true. If you think about how much influence and how much our husbands rely on us to help them, to be a helpmeet. We're supposed to be a helpmeet.
Exactly.
And how do we do that? Well, let's look at this list.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the things she did.
Mm-hmm.
She was definitely a help to her husband in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great partnership.
Yeah.
It's the husband and the wife working together. She benefits him. He in turn benefits her. The reputation is known far and wide.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing.
It is. And that phrase, the man is the head and the woman is the neck, it's almost always used in a way that is not good, you know, that she's manipulative and she is really calling the shots. He doesn't know it because it's just natural for him to do what she wants, but that's not what this woman was. This woman, this worthy woman, even the worthy women today, they are women who are a strength, and he can keep his head in its position because she's just helping to hold him up while he's there.
Just like our neck supports.
That's
our
right.
head.
The support.
She's, you know, the support and the encouragement to him that he needs.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, we can do that. Looking at her from this perspective, it can make those attributes seem more attainable. But you know, we look at this couple, and it is about both of them. And what do we think? You know, when you see a couple walk in and they just, you know, they just catch your attention, and you look at them and you're like, oh, they must be a power couple. Well, the picture that we have of them, you look at them and for scripture purposes, they are a power couple, and they're making a difference. And hopefully we're joining together with our husbands, and we're being a power couple, not for our own glory or our own praise, but to the glory of God, that we can help build up his church together, because a team does so much together. You know, we talk about the seasons of our lives, and you'd mentioned that, Tammy, looking at Proverbs 31, having those stages and those seasons. You know, if we look at verses 11 through 22 and then 24 through 27, they describe similar tasks. And looking back at that Hebrew chiasm again, you can see where they're lined out on there. It's not a snapshot of a woman at a fixed age, just in her 40s, accomplishing all these things, but it's a progression that goes throughout her entire lifetime. So we start out looking at this young woman, then you've got the middle-aged, followed by an older woman, and finally you've got this woman who has reached her elderly years, and the tasks that she's doing in her elderly years look different than those ones when she was out in the field and digging and sweating and doing all the things, when she could still bend over and pull all the things out. You know, have you noticed some changes in your own abilities outside?
Just a few.
We decided to put a garden in at the School of Preaching. The Manna Project was working on it, and I noticed after a few days my hips locked up. I'm like, when did this happen? This is a thing? I didn't know your hips could unlock. So yeah, that's just one of those changes of life. It's a season. Now, I've just learned that I've got to pick my veggies differently, but it's still possible. But there's some of these tasks that she was not accomplishing in her later years. And there's some things that we're going to have to make adjustments as we're still working and striving to be a daughter of wisdom and a daughter of value and a daughter of worth, and putting ourselves to work for our families, for our husbands, and for the Lord.
My daughter just got married about 3 years ago, and she's got a wonderful little boy. You know, if you ever want to know more about him, just ask. He's amazing. But, you know, I regularly try to encourage her that, you know, these days are long and the years are short, but it takes time. I can remember being her age and looking at my house and looking at my life and thinking, how do you do it all? I'm an adult and I'm supposed to be able to pay the bills and clean the house and do the laundry and work my job and take care of my husband and how do I do all of this? And I'm trying to encourage her that it takes time. You know, it's a progression. It's a learned thing, and you just keep plugging along, and every day it'll get a little easier.
And it's a continual learning thing. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know all this. I don't know. Am I really an adult? You know,
I feel that way a lot.
Yeah, you know, it's something that we have to continually learn and look at. And we know that it can be attained in segments and parts, and you know, like we've said, may not be successful every day, but we can have this goal of the virtuous woman and we can aim for that goal and attain parts of it along the way.
And it gets easier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's things that I do today that is just automatic. I automatically, if I walk into the kitchen and the counters are dirty, I grab the sponge, I start wiping it up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think about it.
Right.
Whereas, 30 years ago, I'd have been like, do I really have to clean that up? It changes. It just becomes a way of life.
Uh-huh.
And the same is true with our spiritual lives.
Mm.
When we keep practicing these things over and over and over, it just naturally comes. And you just find yourself doing it automatically without having to ask, am I going to do this today?
Uh-huh.
Am I going to take care of my family? Am I going to love my neighbor? Am I going to go to this Bible class today? It's not a question.
Right. It's just something we wake up and
just
start
what
doing.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because it's it becomes
It's
who
that
you are.
lifetime of faithfulness.
Yes. It
It's
is.
that traveling along the road, the way of
Yeah.
the lifetime of faithfulness.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I love that. Looking at verse 10 in Proverbs 31, who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies? Well, we've looked at whether or not this was Bathsheba and her words of wisdom wanting to pass along. It doesn't matter who it was, but this is a mama and she just wants what's best. And you've got a couple of boys, you got a grandson now. Can you relate a little, Tammy?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
I find myself regularly, my 21-year-old is still at home, and I am very thankful for that, because I still get to occasionally tell him, oh, you don't want to do that. You see that over there? You don't want that in your life.
Yeah.
I still get to influence him.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a 15-year-old. Same thing. It's like I'm counting down the days because I know how soon he will be gone as well. And it's like, okay, I got this little bit of time to try to get this in him, to instill these values and these thoughts so that he doesn't go astray or isn't led away by the woman that we don't want.
Proverbs 5, Proverbs 7,
yes,
those
yes.
women. We don't want those.
No.
And and I know it's when they're in the home, that's when we have the greatest influence. Our son is 35 years old. He has, Mike said something the other day that he has been out of the home now as long as he was in our home.
Oh,
Wow.
But I'm still his mother.
that's right.
And I still have an influence on his life and should exert that influence when I can for the good. Just like, I don't know if y'all are blessed to have your mothers alive, but I am. She's 88 years old, and she still has a major influence on my life for the
that's
good.
good.
We never stop having that influence on our children. Yes, it's not as much as when they're still at home, but we're always a mother.
Yes.
That is so true. I hear my mom say that. I'll always be your mama.
You'll
not one of
always
those
be my
things.
baby.
That's right. It never doesn't go away. She called me baby girl.
That's sweet.
But this has been just really eye-opening, and getting to discuss it with two women who, I off the cuff, and again, it wasn't anything that you did. It was my own insecurities, but two women that I admire so much. To get to sit here and study this Proverbs 31 woman with you all has just been amazing. And that's all we're going to be able to talk about for today, but we're going to be able to continue this again, and we hope that you will join us for the next one as we follow up going through the rest of Proverbs 31 and looking at the seasons of her life and exactly what those look like as we break those down. Thank you for joining us.